Good morning and welcome to this video. My name is Lars Haukeland and I'm starting now to record a new series of videos in the subject of apologetics. And if you're not familiar with that term, apologetics is defined as such reasoned arguments or writings in justification of something, typically a theory or religious doctrine. So there you go. Basically, it's a defense of the Christian faith, you could say, historically. So I'm going to record a few videos on this subject. It might actually prove to be quite a few. And the very first video is called, "Is there really a God?" Now that's a question that many people might have asked at one time or another. But I'm going to use material from Answers in Genesis when I'm discussing this here with you. Now, part one, video number one in this series is there really a God? And when I talk about God, I'm talking about an eternal, uncreated being. Now, you know as well as me that everything has a beginning. If you have a day has a beginning and an end, you know, the sun rises, the sun sets, and this life has a beginning, although some people argue when the life starts. If you are married, your marriage had a beginning. If you got a job, you started in that job sometime or another. And if you listen to a song, that song has a beginning and an end as well, but it has a beginning. And if you watch a movie, that movie has a beginning. And we also would like to apply this to things like the sun, the moon, and the stars, and everything we see up in the universe. Also everything that we see here on earth. Everything has a beginning. And of course, as a Christian, I believe that God created all these things. And of course, then many people come and they come with the question and say, well, who created God? Well, if you look at the Bible, it doesn't say that God has been created. It doesn't even try to defend the existence of God. It starts with, in the beginning, God, and there you have it. God is assumed. He is not tried to be explained as why he exists. So there is no attempts in the Bible to prove God's existence. We assume that God is. He is outside of time. He is eternal. He knows all things. He is indefinite or indefinitely intelligent, and he's also indefinitely existent, and he's also indefinitely present here and there and everywhere. I know it's a lot to take in if you're not familiar with the concept of God. But the question remains then, is it logical for us to believe in such a God? Can modern science allow for such a notion as God? Now, first of all, if we're trying to discover this, how do we go about it? What would we look for? Now, obviously, God is an intelligent supernatural being. If he's intelligent, then we need to look for evidence of his intelligence. So, how do we recognize the evidence of intelligence? Well, in archaeology, when you go and dig in the dirt, you find some stone tools and you say, wow, this is evidence that there is some intelligence in this area, that there have been intelligent people because somebody made these stone tools here. You look at the Great Wall of China and you think, wow, this didn't just pop up by itself. Somebody built this. And also you could say the same thing about the US Capitol building in Washington, D.C. You could say it about the Sydney Opera House, some of the most famous buildings on this planet. And when you look at the heads on Mount Rushmore, Do you believe that erosion just happened to make these four faces in the mountain? Obviously not. And in the same way, we look at cars, we look at airplanes, we look at computers, we look at houses and all these things, and we see it and we say, yeah, of course, somebody built this, somebody made this. We know that these things were not the result of time and chance. Somebody designed these things. Now, William Paley is a man that I would like to mention here in this video, because he came with a design argument. Now, William Paley was an Anglican clergyman, and he's famous for making up the theory about the watch and the watchmaker. The watch and the watchmaker. And he wrote this: the watch must have had a maker. There must have existed at some time or at some place or other an artificer or artificers who formed it for the purpose which we find it actually to answer, who comprehended its construction and designed its use. So Paley, he said that if you have a watch, somebody must have made that watch. That watch didn't get together just by itself. Somebody willfully created this watch. And in the same way, Paley believed that the Lord was the designer of all things that we see in the universe. Of course, he had a theory that the Lord was more remote to his creation. He wasn't there, and but he's kind of like distanced himself from his creation. But that's the theory that Paley came with. Now, living things show evidence of design. Now, I like science fiction, and Isaac Asimov, he's a well famous sci-fi writer, and he is absolutely one that does not believe in God. But he said, in man is a 3-pound brain, which, as far as we know, is the most complex and orderly arrangement of matter in the universe. Now, Isaac Asimov said this. Now, wouldn't it be logical to assume that if man's highly intelligent brain designed the computer, that the human brain also must be a product of design? Doesn't that strike you as logical? Some scientists accept this, that Paley said about the design argument, but not Paley's designer. Dr. Michael Denton, he's a professor in molecular biology, he said, it is the sheer universality of perfection, the fact that everywhere we look, to whatever depth we look, we find elegance and ingenuity of an absolute transcending quality which mitigates against the idea of chance, alongside the level of ingenuity and complexity exhibited by the molecular machinery of life. Even our most advanced artifacts appear clumsy. We feel humbled as Neolithic man would in the presence of 20th century technology. And this is not written by a Christian, this is written by a scientist. Now, many people know Dr. Richard Dawkins, Professor Richard Dawkins. Now, he wrote a book called The Blind Watchmaker. So he obviously, he knows about Foley's work. And he wrote in The Blind Watchmaker, we have seen that living things are too improbable and too beautifully designed to have come into existence by chance. He actually admitted this, although he seems to refute it in other things that he wrote. So, who or what is the designer? If a designer made all this, made the universe, who or what is the designer? Now, to the Christian, again, I say I'm a Christian. I'm honest about that. I'm telling you about this. And I'm recording this video with a very determined purpose. But to the Christian, it is God. In the beginning, God created, it says in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. And in Colossians 1:16, it says, "For by him," that's Jesus, "all things were created that are in heaven and that are in earth." So the Bible obviously teaches that the designer of the universe is God. Richard Dawkins, he wrote about Paley's argument. He says, "Paley's argument is made by passionate sincerity and is informed by the best biological scholarship of his day, but it is wrong, gloriously and utterly wrong. The analogy between telescope and eye, between watch and the living organism, is false. Natural selection, the blind, unconscious, automatic process which Darwin discovered and which we now know is the explanation for the existence and purposeful form of all life, has no purpose in mind." So here he seems to go against what he's written before. He's saying that Darwin has shown us this, and we all know this, and we all accept that evolution is true. But that is not the case. Darwin is not the first one that came up with the idea of evolution, and not everybody does not support what Darwin has been writing. Some accept parts of it, some accept all of it, some accept none of it. It has no mind, he continues, and no mind's eye. It does not plan for the future. It has no vision, no foresight, no sight at all. If it can be said to play the role of a watchmaker in nature, it is the blind watchmaker. And he's talking about ID, intelligent designer, that he doesn't seem to believe in. But what Dawkins is continually supporting a gradual step-by-step transformation, and this by the use of natural selection and mutations. And I will talk a little bit about both of these. But when I touch on different subjects on this video, just know that I'll be back in different videos and probably talk more about it and just have one topic. No, this is not the topic for this time. But he's talking about evolution as its own designer. That's what Dawkins is saying. So, does natural selection then produce design? Well, life is built on information. Now, we know very well that everything living contains DNA, and this DNA makes up every living organism that we know about. Now, natural selection does not add any new information, and this is important. Great variation, and we find great variation within different kinds, you could say. So, when you have the dog kind, you could say, in there you have wolves, you have coyotes, you have dingoes, you have the wolves and the dogs and many different sorts of wolves and dogs, but they still don't become a different species or a different kind. They still go under the heading of wolf or dog. They don't suddenly become a horse, for instance. They don't do that. And there is a misconception that natural selection is evolution in in progress there, that we can see evolution in natural selection, but it's not. If you imagine a mountain, and on this mountain you have all these, say it's a bird mountain. You get lots of birds, and they come in all shapes and sizes. They have different colors. Some are white, some are brown, some are black. Now, if an eagle comes and fancies a meal, he would probably first find the white ones. The white ones against the mountain would be very easy to spot, and he would probably catch them if he wanted to catch one of them for his dinner. And then eventually he would find the black ones, because they're not brown, and they would stand out a little bit, not as much as the white ones. And in the end, you'd only have brown birds left on this mountain. Well, that doesn't mean natural selection here. It doesn't mean that somebody has developed through evolution so that they all become brown and can survive. It's the survival of the fittest. It doesn't mean that evolution is going up. It actually means that evolution is opposite. It goes downwards. You lose all these other colors and you only are stuck with one color. So actually there are lots of birds that die, and you don't, after a while, you don't get that color again, because you don't have that in the DNA anymore. But it's not a progression, it's a regression. So we have this wrong sometimes. This is actually quite the opposite of evolution. Right, now let's look at mutations. Can mutations produce new information? Now, if you ask a scientist, most likely the answer will be no, because we've seen this time and time again. Dr. Lee Spetner at Johns Hopkins University says, information cannot be built up by mutations that lose it. And he goes on to say, a business can't make money by losing a little bit at a time. Dr. Werner Gritt puts it like this: there can be no increase in information, and in general, the results are injurious. In other words, it produces injuries. It produces faults. New blueprints for new functions or new organs cannot arise. Mutations cannot be the source of new information. Dr. Werner Gritt, or Werner Gritt, however you pronounce it. So we see that mutations is not the answer if you ask the scientist. Now, there are some people talking about useful information, useful mutations rather, but it's always DNA losing information. They're losing information, and even like I was doing another study that I'm writing about in Norwegian, and it was talking about the sickle cell, and the sickle cell shows to be profitable if you get malaria, but it is still a disease where you don't get enough blood, because the blood doesn't reproduce like it should, and it lives very much shorter lifespan than a normal blood cell. So it is actually harmful. Even the sickle cells are harmful, even though some scientists says this is a proof of some positive and useful mutations. But mutations, all in all, is bad. And we have more problems than that. Let me try to imagine a 747, okay? And you're reading in the construction book of the 747 that this plane is made up by 6 million parts. Now that's a lot of parts. Now, none of these parts fly by themselves. Now, maybe you're high up in the air, maybe you're doing 500 miles per hour, that's 805 kilometers per hour, at 35,000 feet above the earth, and you suddenly realize that the airplane that you're in contains many pieces that don't actually fly. But when you assemble these parts, then they can fly. When you put together the airplane in the right way, you put together the engine and the wings and everything, then it works and it can fly. Now, it's the same way in our bodies, in living tissue. We have a lot of biochemical machines, and without these biochemical machines, we cannot live and we cannot exist. Now, all parts in this biochemical machine must be in the right place at the right time, in the right concentration. That means, in the right amounts. Now, evolution from chemicals to living system is impossible. Dr. Michael Behe, he's a professor of biochemistry, he says that simplicity that was once expected to be the foundation of life has proven to be a phantom. Instead, systems of horrendous, incredible complexity inhabit the cell. The resulting realization that life was designed by an intelligence is a shock to us in the 20th century. So, Behe, however you pronounce his name, he says that things are so complex that we do think that there's some kind of intelligence behind this. Now, consider you swatter a mosquito. Now, why did the mosquito die? You say, because I swapped it. Okay. But if you think about it, it still has all the chemicals of a mosquito. And by squashing it, you actually disorganized it. Once the machinery had been destroyed, the organism could no longer exist. At a cellular level, literally thousands of machines need to exist before life even becomes possible. So evolution from chemicals is not possible. Now there's a greater problem still that I'm going to touch on. Some speculate that as long as the chemicals that are made up of the molecules of heredity, with all that info, if this comes together, if all this information comes together at some time, and if it's done this in the past, then life could have begun. Now that's an assumption, it's a speculation, but life is built on information. In just 1 trillion of the cells that make up the human body, the amount of information in its genes would fill at least 1,000 books of 500 pages each of typewritten information. Now this is a lot of information, folks. Scientists now think this is hugely underestimated. They think that the books are even bigger and there are even more of them. The more equipment we get, the better microscopes, the better, or the better the supplies we get to study. They get better and better, and we find more and more, and the pieces get smaller and smaller. So this is probably underestimated, these 1,000 books or 500 pages. But the question remains, where did all this information come from? It's not a new question. We've been asking this for years. Now, imagine that a professor takes all the letters in the English alphabet from A to Z, and he places them in a hat, and then he passes this hat around to some of his students, and he asks them to randomly select one letter. Now imagine if they came up with a B and an A and a T. By chance, okay, you have the word bat. Now, imagine using this method to make up a whole encyclopedia. It just can't be done. And if you add 1,000 encyclopedias that I was talking about earlier, there's just no way. And in addition to that, you have languages. If you talk to a German or a Dutch person and you say bat, if he doesn't know English, he'll say, "What is that? What is that?" You know, it's bat. It's not a German word. So it's just impossible to get all this information by chance. You might have some small words by chance, but you can't have words that make sense and make perfect sentences and have 1,000 books or more with 500 pages in, and all this coming by chance. It just is no way. Now, can information arise from non-information? Well, I already said it cannot come from mutations, but could it arise from matter? Back to Dr. Werner Gritt. He says, a code system is always the result of a mental process. It requires an intelligent origin or inventor. It should be emphasized that matter as such is unable to generate any code. All experiences indicate that a thinking being voluntarily exercising his own free will, cognition, and creativity is required. So, to have a code, you need to have someone that makes that code. Somebody needs to make that code. So what then is the source of information? Again, as a Christian, I would say it's God, because the Bible says, in the beginning, God. God is not bound or limited by time, space, or matter, or anything else. Dr. Richard Dawkins says, to explain the origin of the DNA/protein machine by invoking a supernatural designer is to explain precisely nothing. He says that God was always there, or the DNA was always there. And of course, he goes for the version that the DNA was always there. Now, the crux of the matter is this. If one accepts that there is a God who created us, then in a way God owns us, if you know what I mean. If this God is the God of the Bible, which I believe, he kind of owns us, and he has the right to set rules that we should be living by. He says that we are in rebellion against him. Because of this rebellion, which is called sin in the Bible, our physical bodies are now decaying and dying. But the Bible says we will live forever, either with God or without God. Now, God provided the means of deliverance from this problem in Jesus Christ, so that we could come to him in faith. Now, that's what the Bible says. So, God is the foundation for science and for reason. You might say, how on earth can you say that? Let me explain it. Now, the Bible takes God's existence as a given. I've told you that before. When we try to logically prove something, we show that it must be true because it follows logically from something authoritative. And I believe that's God and his word. Why is logical reasoning possible? Because there are laws of logic. If you have an A, you don't have a not A. You have an A. Now, there are many ways to illustrate this, but there is logic. And how do we know this? That God is the one that gave us logic. Now, God is the author of logic. Now, he has made many absolutes. Now, they are like opposites. I mean, we have good and bad. We have true and untrue, or lies, could you say. And we are made up in his picture, which means that that we know about this, that there are absolutes, there are laws, there are laws of nature, and if there are laws, there must be a lawgiver. What is it that upholds the entire universe? Well, I believe it is God. If you believe in science, you believe that it's the scientific laws. Well, who made up these laws? Where did these laws come from? Did they just happen by chance? So you come to the question, you say, well, who created God? And the answer is that no one created God. He is the great I am. And God said that he is the great I am. That means he is future, he is past, present, and future. God is always present. He has always been existed, and he will always exist. And this is hard to grasp, and it's something that needs to be accepted by faith. Like it says in Hebrews 11 and verse 6, but without faith it is impossible to please him, for he that comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. But it is not blind faith. We see God's creation, and we just know that somebody supernatural with intelligence and power has made this. And then we choose to believe in him, pretty much like scientists will believe that all this information came from nowhere. It was just there, without being able to explain it. Romans 1:20 says, for since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. There is no excuse. You can look at anything living and see how wonderful it is, how much information there is. And when you see this, you can say that there's got to be an intelligent designer behind this. Maybe the Bible is right. Maybe the Hebrew God, Adonai, El Shaddai, that we read about in the Bible, maybe it is he that created the entire world. Now, how do we know the creator is the God of the Bible? Well, we have 66 books in the Bible that tells us so. And only the Bible explains why there are these absolutes like good and evil, truth and lies, and all these opposites, up and down, back and forth. You can make up lots of opposites, and this is also something that is determined by the rules of logic. But the Bible has been confirmed by many people historically, prophetically, and scientifically. Now, the Bible is not a textbook in science, I know that, and nobody has ever claimed that it is, but there are many things written in the Bible that God told people like thousands of years ago, and we, with science, have only figured out some of these things like in the 1800s or 1900s or something. It's really a good study if you like to study that. But many scientists are busy defending the Bible, and I recommend, if you have questions about these topics, of course you can watch the videos that I will record on this page on my blog. But you can contact Answers in Genesis, Science Creation Foundation, or Institute for Creation Research. These are only 3 of those that give out a lot of information about creation and evolution. And I advise you and I encourage you to put your faith in the Word of God. That is where I want to end. So, to come to the answer to the question of this video, is there really a God? I think that everything we see in nature, all living things, proves to us that there really is a God. God be with you.